Hello everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to design an old school rose. I'm going to divide the tutorial in two parts. First part will be about hand drawing an old school rose, and the second part will be about digitally drawing it with Adobe Illustrator. Since for me it was easier to record the iPad screen, I did the first part using this function. But you can do it as you like, on a notepad or hand drawing. In fact, that's how I usually work. So without further ado, let's start. First, we have to do two concentric circles, like a sketch. This determines the center of the flower and the limit of the outer petals. I'll turn down the opacity of this layer. If I had to draw it by hand, I would simply draw it softly. Now we divide it and make a curved line like this, and directly beneath it, we divide it into three parts and we draw three curved lines. I'm actually doing it step by step, slowly. It's a sketch, you don't have to do it perfectly. This part I'm creating are the semi-opened petals on the center of the rose. I draw one completely horizontal facing us and two symmetric ones opened diagonally. The main advantage I have drawing with the iPad is that I can do dirtier sketches on a paper, because on a paper I have to erase the lines. But well, it's actually the same. If you notice, it looks like I'm using a graphite pencil. Once we've drawn the semi-opened petals, I'm going to make a circle which will limit the central part. And I'm also going to draw the petals of the rose that haven't opened yet. This is almost like a pattern. Same petal, I'm just placing it in alternate positions. And this way, I don't close the top of the center of the rose. When we finish sketching the center of the rose, we're going to divide the circle equally . These lines will be the indicators of the limits of the outer petals. They will also serve as a reference on the sketch. It's like when we draw a grid when sketching that is a copy of a reference. This is the same. Since the rose has to be symmetric, if I end a petal in the third line, in the opposite side it has to end there. In order to draw an old school rose, there are two essential tips. First is the circles must have a good proportion. We can't make the center circle too little and the outer one too big, because it will be uneven. And vice versa, because the petals would be very small. The second tip is don't make a rose that's 4 petals or less, because, well, there are some of those that are nice, But in the beginning, they will result kind of like if they were like a square. So I would advise you to do it of at least 5 petals. And personally, I like them with more petals, so it's like rounder. See? In this case, the lines I've drawn are guiding me to make an almost symmetric rose. It's hand-drawn, so it won't be completely symmetric, but something like that. In this case, this rose will have 7 petals, and always have in mind that the one in the front has to be over the one behind it, because we're looking at it like from the side, of course. We keep doing petals until we're done with the rose, and now I just polished a bit the sketch, though it's not necessary. My advice for you is that if you're doing it on paper, don't put too much pressure on the pencil or smudge it too much. Simply because if you do, it will be harder to take it off when it's inked. Here what I do is to lower the opacity and look for a brush similar to a marker or like a round tip pen. Something not too thick with a constant flux, like no pressure dynamics, etc. You will see how it's the simplest brush there is. It's this one here. Now carefully just ink the flower here. Now you see it like in fast forward, but I took my time, but it's not too much needed since it's just inking. The difference between the iPad and the paper is that there's something similar to Ctrl-Z, and I can go back. Once we have all the outlines ready, we're going to start coloring. I'm going to work with big color stains that leave the rose quite dark, but emphasize the parts with light. As you see, the shadow parts can't touch the light parts. It's not a realistic style, but you can't have a light on the bottom in some parts, and then in that same part, like for example in the petals, there can't be some exterior light and suddenly interior light. Well, I think you'll understand it better the way I'm drawing it than the way I'm explaining it. So, if you don't want it that dark, you can use other colors. I'm painting it black because I like it, but in red or any other color, it will be as good. When you're done with the outer petals, with the inner petals, we're going to do the same. If we're leaving the light in the exterior, the interior must be dark. I'm not gonna paint the creases of the outer petals to emphasize them. And now with a brush that feels like a pencil used from the side, like so inclined that the tip doesn't touch the paper, I'm going to apply some shadows from the inside to the outside, like more intense inside than the outside. I barely touched it. I get this texture on the iPad digitally, But in your case, if you're doing it on paper, it will depend on the texture of the paper itself. You can also achieve these using a type of pencil called China marker or grease pencils. Just like we did with the rose, I'm going to do the leaves around it. First sketching and then inking. The inside of the leaf. I'm not going to put too much detail on it. And then for inking, I'll just use this pencil that looks like using like graphite from the side. And when you get the desired opacity, you can consider your hand-drawn rose finished. There it is. Now I can cut it, and you can have it on a notepad or a sheet of paper or wherever you want. Now I'm going to show you how to do that style of roses in digital version using Adobe Illustrator. First, just like we started out before, we create a circle which will mark the size of the petals and a concentric circle in the middle that will mark the center of the rose. I'm also going to do a polygon with as many corners as petals will have the rose. As I said before, don't ever do a 4-petal rose. I'd say 5 petals onwards. In this case, I'll do a 6-petal rose. Now lock the layer, create a new one. And now I'll start selecting the thickness of the line I'm going to be working with. I think 10 is okay. So what I'll do is round this and this. First, I create the open petal. I place it here. Here more or less. Then I create the little petals below. Let's stretch it a bit more so it bends together. Remember to disable the snap to pixel option so it's easier. So these will be the result. Select them and Command plus J to group. And now all the strokes are the same object. Oops, sorry guys. Now they're all the same stroke. Now I duplicate them and place the duplicates symmetrical so they're the center of the rosebud. So now I aligned them in the center, and clicking here will take it a bit up, but if I want it a bit lower, I'll just take it down. In order for these not to be as big as this other one, which should be the biggest since it's closer, I'll simply decrease the size of these, and that's it. This tool here, the Shaper tool, helps me to erase the strokes I'm not interested in. Like these here, these, and this one right here. I'm going to take this circle and I'm going to duplicate it. And once again, I erase the parts I don't want. These lines here remain because it's the sketch layer. So you have to make a movement like this, like I'm erasing the lines. Expand. And we have the rosebud almost ready. There we have the center. Now I'm going to draw the same petals I drew before by hand, but here I only have to draw half of it, and the other half I just duplicate it. There it is. Now it's ready, so Command J and joint. If, for example, I see this should be lower, what I'm going to do is I group these and align them to the center, so it's right in the middle. Now I ungroup them, duplicate this one, place it in the middle, and if I want it a bit lower, I just lower it. If I want these to be closer, then if I move this one to the left 3 steps, I just bring the other one 3 steps to the right. Now these just have to be aligned as they were. And this one with this one. You have to choose Align to Selection, okay? I can make these shorter or lower them, or even make them all shorter. I'm going to take this part out. And I'm going to make them closer in this part, which is the top. I'll leave them like this. What am I going to do now? I'm going to erase the parts I'm not interested in. See? Now I expand it, and that's it. To create the petals, we're going to start in the middle. And we're going to do half petal. You can do it as you like. You can do it with a line directly. You can even do it like this. However you want, with as many corners as you like. And then just duplicate it, flip it, join both parts. And now here we use the Live Corners widget to round the corners. If it doesn't look good, you have to go back, because if you modify the shape after rounding the corners, it's more complicated. So I always recommend you to go back, place the corners as you like, and then use the Live Corners widget again. This way you don't get a headache. Now if you hit O and set the anchor point to the center of the flower, better yet, I'll take this to new layer and disable this part. I'll enable this and I'll lock it. And actually I'm going to change the color so you see the difference. Now group these. Now drag the anchor point to the middle without the petal moving. And now from here, drag the petal while pressing Alt so I can duplicate it around the anchor point here. And here. Or here. And now, if I do the same, selecting these two and dragging the anchor point to the center. Did you get what I did? So select it, drag the anchor point to the center. And now if I move the petal, it will rotate around the anchor point I set. And if I hold Alt while I do this, what I do is duplicate it. See how the pointer changes? I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to turn this into a stroke. I'm going to change the petals like I did before by hand, because they have to be one on top of the other. So now if you look closer, These ugly parts here, I'll erase them too. Oh, in this case, I made a mistake. I have to delete the one inside, which is this one. This one here. And this one here. Oops, sorry. Now I just erase these ones here too with the same mouse gesture. First, I just unlock this layer here. Okay. Great, so now we have finished our rows. Expand. Perfect. It wasn't in the center. What I'm going to do now is another way of coloring. So instead doing like the previous one, in which I left some margins and I painted the rest black and I applied some shadows, here I'm going to give it like a polka dot fill. So for this polka dot, we just get the paintbrush, not the blob brush. We choose the size we want and we start making dots. Like before, more intense in the inner part, so here in the inside, the density of dots will be higher and wider on the sides. I want to do these with the paintbrush and not the blob brush is because this way, if I want to modify the size of the dots afterwards, though I don't think I'll need to, it's easier. With the other one, I would have to start all over again. This makes the computer slow down a bit, but it's really worth it, and since this is a small model, I totally recommend it. I paint the outer petals like before, and the inner ones the same, in the middle with more color intensity, and on the edges less intensity. See? Here I change the size because I actually like it better this way, and I paint some more dots. See how I do it? Always in a circular fashion, because both the petals and the rose are circular. In order to do the leaves, I just have to do like before. With a pen tool, I just draw half, which is as easy as just 2 points, and that's it. And then I just duplicate it and then flip it with the reflect tool so both ends match. Join both strokes using Command J. And there we have the outside of the leaf. Now the inside of the leaf, it's as easy as doing some kind of triangle with the pen tool, just like the other one. In order for the leaves not to be identical, we can draw different ones or modify one of them. So we just have to place it where it belongs. I switched to the strokes layer since I drew the dots in a different layer, just because I like to be organized and it's easier to work this way. I don't have to be removing things, erasing things, etc. Now I'm going to modify this leaf and I'm going to place the leaves around the flower. I'm going to place a group of 3 and another one of 2. And just like we did before with the shaper tool, well, here the unnecessary strokes, the ones behind the flower, are quite easy to remove. First, we place the leaves where we want them to be. We disable the dots layer. That's why it's useful to have them in a separate layer. And now, just like before, we erase the parts of the leaves that would be invisible. And when we're done with this, we start filling these like before with the paintbrush. It's quite easy, you just have to click, making sure you don't drag the pointer. I didn't get into this tool because it's practically the simplest Illustrator has, so now I change the size of the dots again because I want them to be smaller. And that's pretty much it. Now we can play with it and change the colors. Like, for example, I'm going to invert so you can see that it looks nice. There you go. And you can even play with these rows and create patterns or use it as a decorative element. I hope you liked this tutorial, and if you have any doubts, just ask away. Bye bye, see you next time!